Because you got a regular routine stop.
Yeah.
That was interesting. I saw it. Oh, how'd they go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was from Oregon.
Yeah. Well, he's infringing my territory. I sell that stuff. You're not in.
So heck, yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one.
We'll mention that too, I think.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the reality of our crime in Waterloo as well, because we, in reality, we're down 20% over the past 5 years. So, but what generates a lot of media attention is the spate of shootings. Those have been a problem. I say have, because we have been doing a good job of holding the people responsible accountable.
Well, German said that of 6 homicides last year, 5 people in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have specific numbers, but yeah. Yeah, we have one unsolved. That happened on Christmas Day. That's right. And I want to talk about how crime gets reported. I mean, the police doesn't control reported crime. Citizens.
Yes, I do.
They call and say, hey, my house is broken into.
So I have some information here too on Crime Stoppers and also the police phone number to call, which is 4340.
Yes.
291.
Don't ask me numbers. I mean, I got so many numbers to remember, I can't.
I know.
Stand by. Three, two, one.
Welcome and greetings to our audience. I'm William Kay, host of this session of For Your Information. You are listening to KBBG 88.1 FM Waterloo. And this is our regular monthly discussion called Trelka's Way with Waterloo's Director of Safety Services, Dan Trelka. Welcome, Director Trelka.
Thank you, William. Good to be here.
It's certainly nice, and I think you have basically everybody has been enjoying the weather, and so crime is down, I assume?
Well, we're making progress. Let's say there are slivers of hope. We still have a lot going on in the community. There's a lot for the police to do. There's a lot for the community to do to make it better. But I'm confident in saying that, yeah, there's slivers of hope.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, we've had a spate of violence in our major cities, Chicago, New York, Boston, Cleveland, and Baltimore. How's it here?
Well, that's a great question, because we're seeing, and I like looking at trends in some of our major cities, not all of them. We're seeing some spikes, some upticks in violent crime, homicides. I think Milwaukee, year to date, last year they had like 50 homicides. I think they're well above 100 right now. If we look at January to May in Waterloo this year compared to last year, yes, we've had our spate of shootings, but our reported crime is actually down 6%. Since 2010, our reported crime is actually down 20%. You know, our shootings all revolve around violent acts some of our gang members are engaging in. And this isn't a news splash for people that are listening. Yes, we do have gang members in Waterloo. Sadly, we do. That's a sad reality. That's a sad fact. But in any city of 70,000 people, you're going to have gang members. Over the past month, we've been incredibly successful in holding these violent gang members accountable.
Well, you have a violent crime rapid response team, or something of that sort.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Our violent crime apprehension team, it's their job to hold the worst of the worst in our community accountable. And the worst of the worst is a good example. One example of the worst is a convicted felon who continues. Now, if somebody's convicted of a felony, that doesn't mean they're a bad person and we're watching them or whatever. No, 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 that's far from the truth. But if you're a convicted felon who continues to engage in criminal behavior and you use violence or weapon while doing it, it's the violent crime apprehensions team to hold you accountable for your actions. So let's say you get back from prison and you engage in some armed robberies. We need to catch you. We need to hold you accountable. You engage in drive-by shootings where a 4-year-old child gets hit. We need to hold you accountable. Like I say, if you're a convicted felon who comes back to our society, we welcome you with open arms. We want to work with you, partner with you, to make sure you don't fall back into this pattern of criminal behavior again. But if you do, we're the police. It's our job to catch you.
That's true. Just a kind of a segue to that, I saw in the paper that a man was arrested for $200,000 worth of marijuana oil. Now, this kind of is probably a way of leading into how do you catch these people?
That's a great case. Tips, 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 tips. That whole case was made with some good tips. And, you know, don't bring that trash to Waterloo, don't bring that trash to Iowa, because we can catch you.
Yeah, this fellow was from Oregon.
Oregon, yeah. I think eye-opening experience. He's going to realize there's more to Iowa than cornfields.
And he won't see much of that, I don't
No,
suppose.
he won't.
Just as a reminder, people can call the police for a non-emergency call on 291-4340.
Yes.
That's in the phone book, and I suppose if you don't know what to do and you want to report something, you still can call 911. The 911 caller will refer you to the right place, right?
Yeah, we prefer that you only call 911 for emergencies, but emergencies are a matter of perception. You know, for routine information or assistance, the 4340 number is a good one.
Yeah, that's something everybody should put in their cell phone. I know I have it in mine in case I do need that.
Yeah, I know. I hardly ever I hardly ever rely on a phone book anymore. Between the internet and contacts in my phone, it's amazing how society has evolved.
So 291-4340 should be in everybody's phone. In
Yes.
case you have a question or something, you can call and have it routinely handled.
Yeah, for 291-2515, that'll get you dispatch.
Mhm.
So
And of course, if it is an emergency, it's 911.
911. Don't look for the 11 on the phone.
And by the way, if you have a little bit of concern about calling the police and being identified, you can also call the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers. Their number is 855-300-TIPS, T-I-P-S, or 855-300-8477. And you can look up things or report things even on their website, www.crimestop.com.
Yep.
And that's if you want to remain anonymous. And I should mention too, if you call 911 or the police regular dispatch number, you can ask to remain anonymous.
You can, yes sir. We want your information. Of course, if we end up in a situation where we're prosecuting a case, and you know, and you have first-hand information, we certainly would like you to be willing to testify. But if not, we'll take your information regardless.
And incidentally, if you do send in a tip, for example, if somebody is in possession of a firearm illegally, there is a reward for that.
Yes.
And if you happen to have any information about Marshawn Glover, the 4-year-old who was struck by a bullet, there's a $1,000 reward for any information leading to that conviction, I understand.
Yes, yes, we're working that one hard. We want to resolve that one. The officers are taking that one very personal, as they are with this latest case we're investigating. You know, any crime where somebody is injured or killed is a tragedy, but when it involves a child, that just compounds it so much more.
Well, it's really senseless because these people who are really obviously weren't shooting at that house or that particular child.
Right.
It's just that he got in the way of some other actions.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, and I'm glad you brought it up, William, because I wanted to talk about it today, because we're at, one of the TV stations was in this morning asking me for updates on Marshawn's case. And it's very frustrating for us because we know there are multiple people that have information and they just don't want to come forward. I hope they have a change of heart someday, and they do, but what's interesting and a positive thing to this whole incident is we generally have an idea who's responsible. We just don't have the evidence to prove it at this point. But this person, they weren't involved in one isolated criminal act on that day. Sadly, when people get involved in criminal behavior, it's a pattern. Generally, people don't wake up one morning and say, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop engaging in criminal behavior this morning. I'm going to be a productive member of society. That generally doesn't happen. This person will continue to engage in criminal behavior and will be held accountable in one of these criminal acts.
And let's just hope he doesn't hit somebody innocent again.
Yes.
That's, of course, the problem.
Yes.
You know, the thing about firearms is there's not many people that are very good shots with a pistol, even just shooting at paper.
Yeah.
When you're running, walking, or in a car shooting, you're even more inaccurate. The further away you are, the less accurate you are.
Yes.
So somebody could be shooting and just totally miss and hit a house, and this happens quite a bit, I think, with drive-bys.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, even in police shootings, I think when we study shootings that officers have been involved in, I think they're hitting what they're aiming at 2% of the time. And some people they'd laugh at that. Well, they're not bad shots. It's these incidents are highly dynamic, highly evolving situations, typically involving multiple moving targets or moving targets. And that's just a sad reality. It's 2% of the time the officers are hitting what they need to.
Well, and they, oftentimes you have to look at what's behind, what's nearby.
They have to consider that,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot to be considered.
Yeah.
I've always said I'm a pretty good pistol shot.
Yes,
but,
you are.
But I've never fired with somebody shooting back at me or
Mhm.
actually at a person. So paper and simulations are one thing.
Well, it was only about 3 or 4 years ago, we had an officer in downtown Waterloo. He's driving through downtown, and there's a big crowd of people downtown, and he sees one individual shooting at another only about 20 feet away. The officer was justified in using deadly force. He didn't because he was concerned about hitting somebody in the crowd. So what he did instead, I mean, interesting what he did do, but he jumped out of his car and actually kicked the guy in the head. And ultimately, with the help of the crowd, got the guy into custody. And then the suspect's life became jeopardized because the crowd began to turn on the suspect and wanted a piece of him. So the officer then had to protect the suspect. It was the officer actually got a Medal of Valor for it because no life was lost. One individual did get hit by one of the rounds, and the gentleman was convicted, and I think he was, within the past year or two, was sentenced to multiple years in prison.
Yeah, and what's the difference now? Because some of the shootings occur with kids, 16 years old?
Yes,
And
yeah.
how is that, is that treated differently?
Well, you know, a 16-year-old shouldn't be legally should not possess a weapon to begin with, so I would say yes and no, treated differently. You know, I'm a big guns right advocate. I'm all for our right to carry and bear arms, but there needs to be some sensibility too. Right? I think if we knew, and now I have a sense of it, but if people truly knew how many kids were carrying guns in our community right now, I think you'd be shocked. And sadly, they're carrying it because they feel this need of protection. They're not carrying this gun because they're going to go out and commit armed robberies. But they feel that their life is in jeopardy, so they take it upon themselves to carry this gun for matters of protection. And that's one thing we need to change in Waterloo. Sadly, that's just not Waterloo. That's why we're having all these shootings in Milwaukee, Chicago, Baltimore, Boston, for the exact same reason. It's just not Waterloo.
Well, you know, I think about the psychology, say, when you get in a car. You get in a car and somebody kind of cuts you off, you get angry, you might go and cut them off. You don't act the way you would if you were outside the car.
You're that fourth personality.
Yeah, and if you have a firearm, if you get angry, you're apt to be a different personality with a firearm than you would be if you didn't have one.
Right, right.
And so there's a certain amount of common sense, and I suppose you have to use some discretion when you're carrying a firearm. And of course, police officers have to all the time. They, as you know, are trained rather extensively in the use of firearms.
Right.
The average person who gets a permit, goes to, say, a 6-hour course, doesn't necessarily have that kind of training background.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It does involve a strong dose of sensibility, but life is funny. It doesn't come in a perfect, neatly wrapped, pretty package. Sometimes it gets a little disjointed and disorganized. That's reality.
Right, so, well, I wanted to talk a little bit, because we talk about reporting crime and so forth. I wanted to go back to the wearing of body cameras.
Yes.
And I just want to quote you. Back in November, you said, "I wish I had a way to record absolutely everything that officers are involved in, because, yeah, they're human. They make mistakes, but they generally do what we need them to do, and do it well."
Yes. Yeah, now we have some cameras on order. Body cameras are in such high demand, they're on back order. Now in the state of Iowa, if I'm not mistaken, the latest I read is, because I wish the state would come up with, provide law enforcement with some guidance on these body cameras, probably in the form of a law, Iowa code. And if I'm not mistaken, the ACLU, who, actually give them a lot of credit. They're pushing Iowa for just that. Hey, we can't, what's recorded by these body cameras can't be made publicly available to everybody. There needs to be some guidelines.
Yeah, not a YouTube object.
And I'll give you a good example. When I was a Sturgeon Bay police officer, I went to a domestic violence call. And myself and Dan Brinkman, one of my fellow officers, got on scene. And the woman was standing there naked from the waist up because she had been violently assaulted by her husband or boyfriend, I can't remember which, it doesn't matter. If we would have had body cameras on, that would have been recorded. The public has no right to see those images. So that's a great example of we need some guidance, and we'll address it with our policy. If the state doesn't come up with any guidelines for us, once we get our initial cameras, we're going to put them on the officers, and we'll utilize the policies we currently have with our squad car videos and stuff. But this pilot program by the officers wearing these cameras, we'll run it for a period of time, and that will help us develop a policy in the usage and what will be made public. And we're going to try to be sensible and logical. I mean, if we come across a situation, with our current laws that we have in Iowa, I can easily articulate that, okay, we have this video of a woman naked from the waist up, she's a victim of domestic violence, or even a sexual assault victim. I will easily be able to articulate why that should not be released. But still, there should be.
And you know there will be lawyers and so forth asking and community groups wanting to see these videos.
Right, right.
The other thing about it was we talked about the anonymity. When you come up to a police officer and you talk to him, your voice is not necessarily recognizable, but your image would be. So how do we protect a person's anonymity?
That's, and that's a great question, because I think Iowa code is mute on that, because there was an interesting case up in Wisconsin where a guy worked at a paper mill. He knew some of his fellow employees were stealing extension cords, I believe. So he called the police, the Green Bay Police Department, and said, hey, listen, I want to remain anonymous. These guys are stealing these cords. Well, one of the suspects came in and made a public records request and got a copy of that recording, and they recognized his voice. The guy ends up dead in a paper vat. Tom Monfiles was his name. So Wisconsin created a law that allowed people, that protected that type of public record. Those recordings, when somebody says, hey, listen, I want to remain anonymous, a law was created to ensure they remained anonymous.
Yeah, that would be very, very important.
And I think I was mute on that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that is something that's going to have to be taken up. And by the way, for those of you who have just joined us, you're listening to KBG 88.1 FM Waterloo. I'm William K., host of For Your Information, and we're talking to Waterloo's Director of Safety Services, Dan Trelka, in this session of Trelka's Way. There was something, I got a phone call today, by the way, this morning. It was an automated call, advising me that the IRS was filing suit against me and wanted me to call a certain number. I know that Mid-American has just released some information saying that the way that people are being approached with being delinquent in their bills is not the way they approach it.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that. We've been having a lot of that lately, I think.
Scams, yes, they're scams. The people that are the predators that are taking advantage of us in this way are becoming very creative and very clever. So we need to be very wary of that. Listen, if the IRS wants you bad enough, they're going to find you. I mean, if you're uncertain about something, if you think it's a scam, call the police department or have somebody else take a look at it, your friend, your neighbor, and evaluate it. A lot of these are strictly scams, and sadly they're quite successful. Like you said earlier, William, if they can just convince one person out of 10 to respond to it and give them money, they're successful. So we got to be careful, we got to be wary. If an organization, now most of us have access to the internet. If Mid-America, or you get a call from somebody purporting to be Mid-America or the IRS, and they leave you a number, Google that number and see what you come up with. And they'll likely indicate that it's a scam. If it's a local company or somebody like Mid-America, if somebody calls and says, this is Mid-America, here's the number, call us back, we need you to pay us this fee, otherwise we're going to cut off your service or whatever. Google Mid-America and see what their number is, and then call the number you find.
You can call their customer service. Any of these organizations, you can call their customer service and ask them about that.
Yes.
And I think it would be also advisable for people to talk to their parents, if their parents are maybe in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, and just advise them, hey, before you do anything, call me, and we'll work it out. Don't take the action on yourself.
They take it, they take advantage of the elderly. What I find comical is now I get scam emails on occasion. Now my email at the Waterloo Police Department clearly indicates that I work for the Waterloo Police Department. I can't believe how many emails I get from scammers saying, hey, this is, my name is Boko, and I'm living here in a foreign country, and I inherited a bunch of money, but I need some help getting it. Can you send me a check for $2,000 so I can access my money?
And then I'll give you $2 million if you do that.
Exactly. I mean,
And I should mention too, that on these, what we call these single sites where people are looking for a dating possibility, it's called dating sites, there are people that are scammed there too.
Yeah.
And you have to be really careful because you can get very familiar with somebody without actually knowing them.
right,
And they would then come and say, oh, I need $3,000 so I can fly over to see you or something. And once you send them the money, you'll never actually hear from them again.
yeah, they're very clever. And what this money is used for, I have no idea. I'm sure it's used to further their criminal enterprise, and their criminal enterprise probably involves terrorism. I don't know.
It just could be. I'm thinking too that there's been a lot of activity by some of the neighborhoods, peace walks and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is that having any effect on anything?
Everything helps. Yeah, I'm loving it because it's focusing on the issue. I mean, it's good. And like I said, I'll take all the help we can at the police department, because you know, to make crime go down, it's not, I've said it so many times, it's not just a police problem, it's a community problem. It takes the involvement of the community and the police. And here's a good example. When a crime gets reported, it's up to us to investigate and hold that person accountable for committing that crime. It's the community's job to keep that person from even committing the crime. That's why I've said from day one, when I came to Waterloo, if you have a friend, a relative, or a neighbor that you know is fallen, and when I say fallen, engaged in criminal behavior, it's up to you to catch them, to help them, to keep them from falling and engaging in additional criminal behavior to make society better.
Well, you really don't do a person any good, like if you're a relative, by protecting them, because ultimately they're going to wind up, as you say, committing more crimes, getting more deeply involved. And the confrontation with the police could be quite serious.
Yes. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Now, this I think I have my throat back here. There is a question that a lot of people are bringing up, particularly in the cities, that the police departments are acquiring a lot of surplus military equipment.
Right.
And that would be firearms and in some cases even vehicles. Now,
Yeah.
we do have a special vehicle, don't we?
We do. We do, that we acquired through a federal grant. It's the Bearcat, and we used to have actually we had an old Air Force vehicle, surplus vehicle, was an armored vehicle that would withstand gunfire and stuff, and we typically use this vehicle for if we conduct a search warrant where we know or there are likely to be firearms in the residence, we will use the vehicle to transport the officers up close to that residence to conduct the search warrant. And we actually use that vehicle a lot. The most significant event where we used it, if you recall, that up in Maynard, I believe it was Maynard, they had a bank robbery. Two suspects were shooting at police with rifles, actually hit two officers, and they called the Waterloo Police Department and says, hey, we got a real problem up here, we need help. So we sent the Bearcat up there. And it was ultimately Waterloo police officers that took these two suspects into custody, and they had their guns on them. They were ready to rock and roll. And we took them into custody without injury to anybody. But that vehicle proved its weight and value right there. Now I'm very cautious I'm cognizant of, I don't want our police department to be viewed as a military occupying force. There's a fine balance there. So we do the best to our ability to maintain that balance. And I think people may disagree with me in Waterloo, so be it, that's their right. But I think we do a pretty darn good job maintaining that balance.
Well, that is, there are some teaching purposes. By the way, I just want to mention too that one of these things with cameras in cases like that, they make good training videos for inside the police department for how things could have been or how they were, what was well done, what was maybe not done as well as it could have been.
Right.
And that's another case too, where I think that these kids had, I think one of them had an AR-15, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, AK-47.
AK-47.
Yeah.
Yes. And now, are we carrying assault rifles now, the police officers, in their vehicles?
Yes, and we have for years. And shotguns, just in case. I remember one time, again back to Sturgeon Bay, at the time I was a patrol officer. I was a patrol sergeant, actually. All we had was pistols and shotguns in our squad cars. And I went on a call where a guy was intoxicated, and he wanted to commit suicide by cop, and he had a rifle. Well, I remember I was probably 5 blocks away from the call, and I looked back at my shotgun, and I've been a hunter most of my life. I was in the Marines. A shotgun is no match for a rifle. All right, at 200 yards, he's going to reach out and touch me with that rifle, and I probably won't hit him with my shotgun. And I was angry, because the Sturgeon Bay Police Department actually had rifles in our armory that we weren't allowed to use because the chief at the time was worried about putting them on in the squad cars. When I became the chief of police in Sturgeon Bay, the first thing I did is train the officers in those rifles, and we put them in the squad cars, because that was baloney. But thankfully, that incident ended well. We approached the residents cautiously and took the guy into custody. But it's a tool. Rifles are a tool. We need them. We're in a society today where no community is immune from a radical terrorist incident, especially from a lone wolf. Rifles are prevalent in our society. You know.
We had that situation down southern Iowa where a police officer was killed serving a warrant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a bad deal.
Yeah, and of course they took him out with a rifle, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, I think it was state patrol SWAT team came in and resolved that situation.
Yeah, it was very tragic. Neighborhood watches, are they helpful? I mean, are they...
You know, the Neighborhood Watch program comes and goes. What's more helpful, in my opinion, is citizens just need to be involved. When they see something suspicious going on, give us a call. Do we need an organized Neighborhood Watch program if we have responsible citizens? What's really beneficial in Waterloo is our neighborhood associations, because they stay in tune with what's going on with the community. Because you know, Waterloo has vast different neighborhoods. We have more than 40 different specific neighborhoods, and they're so different. They're so different in so many different ways. Active neighborhood associations in these different neighborhoods is more important than Neighborhood Watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, because basically a lot of it's about awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you get interest, then you get awareness, and then you get some action.
Yeah.
And if people are looking out for something or watching certain areas, once they become aware, it really is helpful to the police. I was wondering too, now this is becoming sort of vacation season's coming up. What should citizens do? Can you notify the police that you're going to be gone for 2 weeks?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're going to be on vacation for a week or 2 weeks, give us a call. And there are so many different ways to contact us. We've talked about this before. I mean, you can call us. The Waterloo Police Department also has a Facebook page. You can send us a message on the Facebook page for your vacation request. And however you want to contact us, we will keep an eye on your resume.
Well, the only thing is that you don't want to be too public about the fact you're going to be gone.
That's right. Don't post it publicly on Facebook, but send us a message.
That's right. Well, I don't think there's we're really kind of running out of time. I just want to say too that when you do call the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers or the police, to remind just to think about who, what, where, when, and any description that you can possibly give would be really helpful. Again, I want to iterate, when you call 911, it may not seem like they're doing anything but asking you a lot of questions, but the dispatch has been made, the police officers are usually on their way.
Yes.
That you would not actually have been hearing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, the person that's taking that call on 911 is not dispatching the units. There are multiple people in there, so they're going to keep you on the line, get more information. As they're doing that, the ambulance, police officer, fire truck is already on the way.
On the way, and that's good to know because sometimes it's just not apparent.
Yes.
In fact, actually, quite the opposite. You think, well, why are they just asking these questions and not getting a police officer out here?
Yeah.
Okay, so one little question is, do we coordinate and collaborate with Cedar Falls or any of the neighboring areas? You did mention that in that bank robbery that you were very involved in that.
Absolutely. Coordinate with them frequently. We'll rely on each other, even for critical incidents. When we had an armed robbery one time in Waterloo where the 2 armed robbers were shot by the clerk,
Yes.
and that tied up every Waterloo officer. So Evansdale, Cedar Falls, the Sheriff's Department were handling our calls while we were dealing with that.
Yeah, very good. And of course, the
Works both
state
ways.
police, the Sheriff's Department, and the police departments all kind of now have a communication system where they can work together better.
Yep, and it's getting better.
That's really good to hear. Well, once again, we're out of time. We've been talking with the Waterloo Director of Safety Services, Dan Trelka. Thank you, Chief, for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to next time. Yeah, it does go quick, doesn't it? And our thanks, by the way, to all in public safety for their service and the work they do in keeping us safe, fire, crime, and so forth, and just basically lending a hand when you need it sometimes. And thanks to our audience for listening. We appreciate you and our underwriters, and please thank them in person for supporting this radio station, and seriously consider your own contribution. Do your part in keeping us on the air. I'm William Kay, host of this session of For Your Information. You're listening to KBBG 88.1 FM Waterloo, and I wish everyone a safe, healthy, and happy day.
That's good.
Yeah, I do my radio stuff.
Good job.
Thank you, for you too.
Thanks.
I really appreciate that. It's and I think we could probably talk for an hour if we really
We
wanted.
could. I don't know if people would listen, but
I don't know either.
All right, William. Good
Thanks
to see
again.
you. Thank you.
I do have a question though. I know it's been a couple of years since the Lyric and Women's
Yeah.
Has there ever been any,
That is so frustrating. So many things were done the right way. Hey, how are you? Good. Good to see you. I said, give me the names of 12 local most violent gang members, because I've been meeting with EMA. And the last time I met with them, I was disappointed that there weren't more task force.